All of New York City glowed in the twilight skyscrapers, reflecting the sunset, as if a shimmering layer of gold had been draped over them. On the rooftop of a lavish hotel, Owen Crack, a name revered across the American real estate world, sat in a sleek black limousine, silently flipping through the several $100 million contract he had signed that afternoon. In the seat beside him, Sophia Miller, the young model. Currently, his girlfriend giggled while scrolling her phone, her golden hair catching the car's lights and glittering. "I've been looking forward to this trip so much, Owen. Miami, the sunshine, our private beach. This weekend is going to be perfect." Sophia whispered, her slender hand resting on his solid forearm. Owen gave a slight nod, a polite smile drawn across his lips, but his eyes were distant. For a businessman like Owen, romantic getaways with a beautiful young woman were merely an inevitable part of a lavish life. He had never thought about stopping, much less letting anyone reach his heart's deepest layers. For 5 years, he had trained himself to be absolutely cold. The limousine turned onto the private runway at Teterboro Airport, where a Gulfstream G550 jet was waiting. The crew lined up to greet them, and Sophia's eyes lit with pride at being treated like a queen. Owen ascended the aircraft stairs, his steps unhurried and steady, the bearing of a man who held the world in his hands. Inside the cabin, gilded in gold and fine walnut champagne, had already been poured. Sophia sank into a white leather seat, her long legs crossing with practiced poise, fingers caressing the rim of the crystal glass. Owen stood by the window, narrowing his eyes slightly as he watched a technician make a final check of the engines. Right then, the phone in his suit pocket buzzed. A text from an unknown number filled the screen. "She's in the cockpit. And your son is there too." Owen went numb. His whole body felt struck by a bolt of electricity. His hand holding the champagne glass suddenly trembled. The liquid sloshed, scorching his throat as it went down. He coughed, sputtering. Sophia looked over, worried. "What's wrong with you, tipsy, after a single sip already?" Owen shook his head, forcing himself to steady. "It's nothing. Just went down the wrong way." But his hand clenched around the phone, his heart pounding. Those cold words kept playing on a loop in his mind, like a blade twisting into the memory he had tried to bury for the past 5 years. A fierce impulse made Owen spring to his feet. Ignoring Sophia calling after him in confusion, he strode quickly toward the cockpit. A flight attendant hurried to stop him. "Sir, we're preparing for takeoff. You can't go in there." But Owen shoved open the gleaming metal door. The sight before him left him stunned, as if gravity had vanished. In the captain's seat sat a woman with skin that gleamed bronze under the cockpit lights. Curly hair, neatly tucked beneath her pilot's cap, and deep dark eyes focused and intense. Every movement she made, from adjusting the yoke to the crisp authority in her voice over the radio, summoned a time when Owen had been besotted, when he believed they would build a future together. Tristana Johnson, the woman he had left with nothing more than a hastily scribbled note. The woman he had thought he would never see again. Beside Tristana was a small boy about 5, dressed in a miniature pilot's uniform, with big round onyx eyes, and a face, dear God, an exact copy of Owen's when he was a child. In that instant, all sound seemed to vanish. No roar of engines, no blinking electronic signals, only Owen's heart hammering wildly in his chest. The boy turned to look at him, eyes sparkling. "Mister, do you like airplanes? This is my favorite plane." Owen went rigid, unable to utter a word. "Mr. Crack, please return to your seat." Tristana's voice came calm and professional, yet deep down he could still hear a hidden tremor. A flight attendant appeared behind him and dipped her head. "Sir, we're about to take off." Owen backed away like a sleepwalker. When he returned to the VIP cabin, Sophia peered at him curiously. "What's wrong with you? You're as white as if you've seen a ghost." Owen collapsed into the seat, his lips trembling. "Maybe it really is a ghost." The plane began to taxi, the engine's thunder echoing like storm clouds inside his chest. Tristana, that woman, was now the captain. And that little boy. Without a DNA test, Owen knew he was his flesh and blood. The 2.5-hour flight from New York to Miami had never felt so long. Sophia cheerfully raised her champagne in a toast. In the cabin, her ambitious gaze drifting toward the engagement ring glinting in Owen's jacket pocket. But to Owen, that ring suddenly felt as heavy as a boulder weighing down his chest. He closed his eyes, and memories from 5 years earlier unspooled like a film in reverse. A cold, rainy night. Arguments about the future. The fear of commitment that made him leave everything behind. Leaving the woman with the proud eyes and the heart that had once given him everything. "Do you believe in fate?" Tristana's old question echoed now, mingling with the drone of the engines. Owen opened his eyes and stared at the champagne in his hand, its sweetness gone. All his plans, all his calculations suddenly felt meaningless. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Tristana Johnson. Due to a technical issue, we will be making an emergency landing at Asheville Regional Airport, North Carolina. Please fasten your seat belts." Tristana's voice came through the PA, low and steady. But to Owen, each word was a cold blade against his skin. Asheville. That unfamiliar name. Would that be where he faced the truth? Sophia grimaced. "Asheville. Where is that? We're supposed to be going to Miami." Owen said nothing. He knew this wasn't random. No incident just happened to bring him to this small town. This was fate. A trap set by fate or someone's hand. The plane began its descent. Through the window, Owen saw rolling green mountains, winding little roads, and a peaceful town beneath the sunset. A world foreign to him, but perhaps the place that held the piece of memory he had been running from. When the wheels touched the runway, Owen gulped for air like someone who had just escaped an abyss. But he knew this was only the beginning. As the door opened, a mountain breeze carrying the scent of pine and damp earth swept in, making him shiver. Sophia wrinkled her nose in discomfort, but Owen felt his heart beat with a strange, quickened rhythm. Ahead, Tristana descended the steps, her hand gripping Ethan's. The boy skipped along, his eyes lit with simple joy. And Tristana, tall, her uniform, hugging strong lines, turned her head and glanced at Owen for a fleeting heartbeat. Just one look, but enough for him to know the real battle had just begun. The twilight faded, and the Asheville sky wore a deep indigo cloak. Maintenance vehicles slowly moved in on the small runway surrounding the luxurious Gulfstream G550. No neon lights were blazing like in New York, nor the dazzling extravagance of Miami, only dark green hills and the earthy damp scent carried in the mountain breeze. Sophia clutched Owen's hand tightly, her face betraying apparent displeasure. "Owen, this place, it's so rural. I can't imagine having to spend the night here." Owen didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the figure walking ahead with Ethan Tristana. The tailored pilot's uniform hugged her frame, accentuating her strength. Each step was firm, as if nothing could shake her. But Owen knew, buried deep in those eyes, was the storm he himself had sown 5 years ago. Little Ethan skipped toward the small terminal building, clutching his toy airplane. Each bounding step sent his soft curls bouncing in the evening breeze. For a fleeting moment, Owen saw himself as a boy, stubborn, restless eyes lit with passion for everything that soared above the earth. His heart tightened. "Mr. Crack," a technician bowed respectfully. "The plane will need at least 12 hours for inspection. We'll arrange transportation to a nearby hotel for you and your companions." Hotel Sophia immediately cut in her voice, brimming with irritation. "I want a 5-star hotel with a spa and an infinity pool, not some shabby mountain motel." The technician looked uncertainly toward Tristana, as if awaiting her clarification. She gave a slight nod, then fixed her gaze squarely on Owen, her voice calm but decisive. "There's only one guest house within 30 miles. If that doesn't suit you, you can rent a car and leave. But it's already dark, and the mountain roads aren't safe." Her words pierced Owen's chest like a cold blade. It was still that same voice, steady strong, yet burning with an anger and hurt that had never gone out. Sophia gave a derisive laugh and slipped her arm through Owen's. "Who is this woman talking to you like that?" Owen stayed silent. In his eyes, the image of Tristana standing beneath the yellow glow of the small airport lights, her black eyes gleaming with pride, was all that occupied his mind. A black SUV carried the group from the runway winding through pine forests. Night fell quickly, tree shadows stretching long under the headlights. The air was heavy inside the car, and everyone was lost in their own world. Sophia leaned against Owen's shoulder, whispering, "I don't like this place at all. We have to leave tomorrow first thing. Promise me." Owen only nodded faintly, but his mind was elsewhere. He looked through the window and saw Tristana in the front passenger seat, her profile dimly lit by the dashboard. Her eyes stayed on the dark road ahead, never once glancing back. Yet Owen knew the distance between them wasn't just a row of seats. It was 5 years of silence, the ruthless decision he once made, and a child in the back seat, a living reminder of everything he had denied. Ethan, sitting beside him, asked innocently, "Mister, do you know what makes an airplane fly?" "It's lift. I read it in a book. Mom even taught me how to calculate wing angles." Owen froze. That pure voice made his throat tighten. The boy spoke of planes with a burning passion, just like Tristana, just like Owen himself. I know a little," Owen replied hoarsely. "I once dreamed of flying, but later chose another path." "Do you regret it?" Ethan tilted his head, his dark eyes fixed intently on him. The question struck like thunder in the quiet night. Regret. Owen's life had been numbers, contracts, glass towers piercing the sky. He had once believed there was nothing to regret. But now, looking into those innocent eyes, he felt all his achievements meant nothing. The Evergreen Inn appeared around a bend, an old ivy-covered house, glowing warmly with yellow light. No luxurious pool, no marble lobby, only the scent of pine and the crackle of a fireplace. The hostess, a silver-haired woman, greeted them warmly. She looked at Tristana with the familiarity of an old friend, then smiled at Ethan. "Hello, little pilot." "Back to revisit me." Ethan beamed and hugged her tightly. Owen stopped in his tracks. Clearly the boy wasn't just a random young passenger. This was a familiar home to which Ethan and Tristana belonged. And he, the boy's father, had been absent all these years. The room was simple but cozy. Sophia flung her purse onto the bed, her voice sharp with irritation. "I don't get it. Why are we stuck in this town?" "You, Owen? Crack should be in a luxury hotel in Miami, not some shabby wooden room." Owen sat by the window, gazing at the faint glow of the courtyard lights. Outside, Tristana was walking with Ethan, their shadows merging into the gentle night. The sight made his heart ache. "Tomorrow, we'll leave Owen," murmured. But even he felt the answer was uncertain. Sophia approached, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Don't you find it strange? She's a pilot who happens to show up on your flight. And that boy, have you looked at him? He looks uncannily like you." Owen snapped his head toward her. He caught the sharp, suspicious glint in her eyes for a moment. Don't talk nonsense, he growled, his hand tightening until veins stood out. Sophia shrugged, smirking. I'm just saying what anyone can see. But fine, I don't care. What matters is that you remember we still have an engagement ceremony to announce. Owen gave no reply. Deep inside, he knew everything was cracking. And somehow, he could no longer pretend as he once did. Night fell. Owen stepped out onto the wooden porch, inhaling the crisp mountain air. In the yard, Ethan sat on a swing, clutching his toy plane with Tristana beside him, her curls falling loose in the warm light. The boy looked up and waved. Mr. Owen, sit with me. Owen hesitated. Mr. Owen, those two words struck the raw wound in his heart. But then he walked over and sat down. Ethan eagerly held out a notebook. I drew this plane. One day I'll be the best pilot in the world, just like Mom. Owen stared at the scribbled sketches, his throat tightening. Beside him, Tristana remained silent, her eyes fixed on the distance, as if he didn't exist. Ethan, it's late. Go to bed now, she said gently. But I want to tell Mr. Owen more. There will be time tomorrow. Her firm voice cut him off. Ethan obediently got up, waved goodnight to Owen, and ran inside. Only the two adults remained, the silence between them heavy. Owen turned to her, speaking softly. Tristana, the boy, don't. She cut him off, her tone cold as steel. You have no right to say his name or ask about him. You chose to disappear, Owen. For 5 years I've learned to live without you. And so has Ethan. Her words slashed straight into his chest. Owen wanted to protest and explain, but the words stuck in his throat. Tristana stood, her dark eyes blazing with proud fire. You may be a billionaire and hold skyscrapers in your hands, but you're nothing but a coward to me. A man who ran when love demanded courage. Don't try to step into my life again, Owen. You gave it up long ago. She turned and walked inside, leaving Owen alone in the night. The mountain wind bit cold, but it wasn't as cold as the emptiness in his heart. That night, Owen tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Images of Tristana and Ethan swirled in his mind. Every innocent laugh, every proud look of hers haunted him like ghosts from the past, suffocating him. For the first time in years, Owen realized that money, fame, and contracts could never erase one truth. He had lost the most precious thing, and perhaps fate was forcing him to face it. Outside, the swing creaked softly in the wind. The ghosts of the past had returned, and Owen knew he could no longer keep running. The mountain night had a way of pressing itself against the windows of the Evergreen Inn, thick and suffocating, as though the hills themselves were intent on keeping secrets. Owen lay awake in the narrow guest bed, staring at the timber beams above him. The mattress was softer than he expected, but comfort was impossible. His mind was stormy. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Tristana. Her dark eyes had locked on him in the cockpit, steady, commanding, yet carrying that flicker of something unspoken. Rage, maybe. Betrayal, certainly. And beneath it all, a haunting trace of what once existed between them. But more unbearable than her was the boy. Ethan. The little face with its startling familiarity, the laughter that echoed with pieces of Owen's childhood. He had spent years believing he had severed the past with clean, merciless precision. Yet here was the living proof that no choice, no matter how decisive, remained without consequence. His phone buzzed softly on the bedside table, slicing through the silence. Owen grabbed it, pulse quickening. Another anonymous message glowed on the screen. You cannot run this time. She chose this landing. And so did fate. He sat upright, the cold glass of the window pressing against his back. The words stung with a precision that felt too personal. Someone was orchestrating this. But who and why? Across the room, Sophia stirred. She had fallen asleep hours earlier, still grumbling about country motels and broken champagne flutes. Her beauty, polished and immaculate, seemed almost artificial against the rustic wooden walls. Even in sleep, she looked restless and intruder, in a world that wasn't built for her. Owen rose quietly, careful not to wake her. He padded to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the inn's garden stretched into the dark, dotted with lanterns that swayed in the cool night breeze. And there, under one of those lanterns, he saw a silhouette. Tristana. She was sitting on a bench, her posture straight, her gaze lifted to the stars. Ethan's small form was curled beside her, fast asleep, his head resting against her arm. The sight tightened something deep in Owen's chest. A fragment of peace he had long denied himself, a picture of a life that could have been. And in that moment he realized what terrified him most. It wasn't the past catching up to him. It was the possibility of what he had missed. The following morning, Asheville revealed itself in soft mist and the golden hue of dawn. The mountains loomed like ancient guardians, their peaks kissed by sunlight. The evergreen inn smelled of coffee and fresh bread, the kind of scent that carried warmth, family, and the luxury of simple things Owen hadn't allowed into his life. Ethan's laughter carried through the hallway before Owen exited his room. He followed the sound, instinctively drawn as though by gravity. In the dining room, he found the boy perched on a chair, much too high for him, swinging his legs while buttering toast with more enthusiasm than precision. Tristana sat opposite a cup of black coffee, cradled between her hands. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither spoke. The world narrowed to that single glance, hers defiant, his conflicted. "Good morning," Owen said finally, his voice low. "Morning," Tristana replied, tone clipped but controlled. Sophia swept in a moment later, silk robe, flowing like she was walking a runway. She eyed the wooden furniture with open disdain, then smiled too brightly at Ethan. "Well, aren't you adorable?" she cooed. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Ethan," the boy replied, grinning. "Do you like airplanes?" Sophia blinked, caught off guard. I model clothes, not planes." Ethan turned his attention back to his toast, clearly unimpressed. Owen hid a smirk behind his coffee. Tristana's lips quirked ever so slightly, though she said nothing. Later, while walking through the inn's garden, Sophia slipped her arm through Owen's, her voice hushed. "Darling, don't you think it's strange that woman happens to be the pilot of our jet? And the boy?" She paused, lowering her voice even more. "He looks like you. Exactly like you." Owen's jaw tightened. "Sophia, don't start. I'm not starting. I'm observing." Her tone turned sharp. "Do you expect me to believe this is all a coincidence, that your ex-girlfriend magically appears here with a child who could be your mirror image?" He stopped walking, pulling his arm free. "Drop it." Sophia crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "Fine. But don't forget, we have a future to announce: engagement. Miami, the resort. I won't let some woman from your past ruin that." Her words stung, though not in the way she intended. Future, engagement, resort. They suddenly felt hollow, flimsy, compared to the weight of a boy's smile and a woman's steady gaze. That evening, Owen found himself again outside, drawn to the lantern-lit garden. Tristana stood there, arms folded, eyes on the horizon, where the last sliver of sun melted into the mountains. "You planned this," he accused softly, stepping closer. Her head snapped toward him, eyes flashing. "Do you think I orchestrated a multi-million-dollar jet's hydraulic failure to make you land here?" "Then how?" His voice rose despite himself. "How do I step onto a plane and find you at the controls with a boy who..." His throat closed around the words. With Ethan. Tristana's laugh was short, bitter. Fate has a cruel sense of humor, Owen. Or maybe it's justice. Justice, he echoed, incredulous. She turned fully to face him now, her expression hard. You left without a word. Do you know what it's like to wake up one morning and realize the man you loved has vanished? Were his promises worth less than the paper he scribbled them on? Owen swallowed hard, guilt twisting inside him. I was scared. Commitment. Don't. Her voice trembled with restrained fury. Don't you dare reduce it to fear. You made a choice, and that choice left me to raise a child alone. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Owen wanted to reach for her, apologize, and beg for some forgiveness. But the words lodged in his throat like thorns. A small voice interrupted the storm. Mommy Ethan stood in the doorway, pajama-clad, clutching his toy plane. His big eyes flicked between them, sensing tension, though not understanding it. Tristana immediately softened, kneeling to his level. What is it, sweetheart? I couldn't sleep. He glanced shyly at Owen. Can he read me a story? The request stunned them both. Tristana hesitated, searching Owen's face, as though weighing whether to trust him with even this small fragment of her son's world. Finally, she nodded. Minutes later, Owen sat at the edge of Ethan's small bed, reading aloud from a book about explorers of the sky. The boy listened wide-eyed, clutching his plane, every word sinking into his imagination. Owen gently closed the book when his eyelids grew heavy and his breathing evened. For a long moment he watched him sleep, the rise and fall of his small chest, the way his curls framed his forehead. A fragile miracle he had never known he wanted now lay before him like a gift he didn't deserve. When Owen rose, he found Tristana leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching. Her eyes were unreadable, a storm of emotions hidden beneath the surface. Don't get used to it, she murmured, and walked away. Later that night, back in his room, Owen stared once more at the glow of his phone. The anonymous messages hadn't stopped. You think you control your empire, but here you control nothing. He deleted it instantly, anger and fear colliding in his chest. Someone was watching. Someone wanted him here. He moved to the window. The mountains loomed silent and vast, shrouded in mist. Owen felt small for the first time in years, not as a billionaire, a man who had built towers that pierced the sky, but as a father who had abandoned his child before even knowing him. He whispered into the darkness, though no one was there to hear, I can't run anymore. And in that admission, beneath the watchful silence of Asheville's mountains, Owen Crack realized the past had finally caught him, and this time it would not let go. The morning broke with a clarity that belonged only to mountain towns. Mist drifted lazily across the ridges of Asheville, dissolving in the early light, like secrets evaporating before they could be spoken. The Evergreen Inn was already stirring. The smell of maple syrup and cinnamon rolled through the hallway, wrapping guests in a warmth of another era. Owen found himself restless, caught between two worlds, the one waiting for him in Miami, polished, predictable, built of glass towers and diamond rings, and the one unfurling here uninvited, yet undeniable, full of echoes of a life he had once abandoned. When he entered the foyer, he saw Tristana with Ethan at her side. The boy's small backpack dangled from his shoulder, stuffed with books and tiny model planes. Beside them stood an older man, tall, despite his bent posture, his silver hair cropped close, his stance carrying the unmistakable discipline of a soldier. His eyes, sharp, assessing, landed on Owen with quiet force. Grandpa, this is Mr. Crack, Ethan announced proudly, stumbling a little over the formal tone he had heard adults use. Samuel Johnson extended his hand. His grip was firm, his gaze unyielding. Owen Crack, he repeated slowly, as though weighing the name. I've heard the name before. In newspapers, on television. A man who builds palaces in the sky. The compliment, if it was one, felt like a challenge. Owen inclined his head politely. I try to build things that last. Samuel's eyes did not soften. Then you should learn that what lasts isn't always made of steel and glass. Tristana's expression revealed nothing, though Owen caught the flicker of tension in her jaw. She motioned toward the door. Grandpa offered to have us for dinner tonight. It will be less formal than you're used to. I'd be honored, Owen replied, though the words tasted strange in his mouth. Honored. He wasn't sure if that was the right sentiment, but he felt the weight of the invitation as something more than courtesy. Asheville greeted them with quiet dignity. The streets were lined with old brick shops, their windows dressed in hand-painted signs instead of digital screens. Local artisans displayed pottery and quilts, their colors warm against the muted stone. Children pedaled bicycles down narrow streets, waving as they passed. Sophia walked at Owen's side, her designer sunglasses perched like armor, her heels clicking against the uneven pavement. She looked out of place, her beauty too polished, her disdain too thinly veiled. This is quaint, she murmured, as if the word itself might contaminate her. But for Owen, the town stirred something unexpected. He slowed at the sight of a bookstore tucked into the corner of an old church, at the aroma of roasted coffee drifting from a family-run cafe. He hadn't known such places still existed, not in his world of contracts and towers. And strangely, he felt the edges of his certainty begin to blur. Ethan tugged at his sleeve. See the fountain? Before Owen could react, the boy had already dashed ahead, his laughter echoing down the street. Tristana hurried after him, but Owen followed too, drawn by something more profound than curiosity. Ethan leaned precariously over the stone at the fountain's edge, tossing a penny into the water. What did you wish for? Owen asked softly, crouching beside him. Ethan grinned, dimples flashing. If I tell, it won't come true. Then keep it safe, Owen whispered. His throat tightened unexpectedly. He wondered what a child who looked like him would wish for, and whether he had the right to hope it was for him. By evening, they arrived at the Johnson house perched on the edge of town. It was nothing like the penthouses Owen inhabited. The two-story home was built of stone and cedar, its porch wrapped in vines of jasmine that perfumed the air. Light spilled from the windows, golden and inviting. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken, herbs, and cornbread, still steaming from the oven. The walls were lined with photographs, black and white images of pilots in uniform, a younger Samuel in his Air Force days, a smiling woman holding an infant Tristana. For the first time in years, Owen felt like an intruder. Not into luxury, he had been welcomed into every penthouse and resort imaginable, but into intimacy, into history that was not his own. Dinner was set at a long wooden table, polished with age. Samuel sat at the head, Ethan chatting about school and planes beside him. Tristana took her place on the other side, her composure calm but guarded. Sophia sat near Owen, her posture stiff, her eyes darting around the room with thinly veiled disapproval. The meal began with small pleasantries. The weather, the town, the food. Owen complimented the cornbread, genuinely surprised by how comforting it tasted. Tristana said nothing, though Samuel's eyes flicked to Owen, as though noting even the sincerity of a compliment. It was Samuel who finally broke the silence. So, Mr. Crack, What brings a man like you to Asheville? Surely it wasn't by choice. The table went still. Sophia glanced at Owen, waiting for his polished answer. But Owen hesitated. His gaze caught on Ethan, who was carefully cutting his chicken with the seriousness of a surgeon. Sometimes life doesn't give us choices, Owen said at last. His voice was quieter than he intended, more honest than he expected. Samuel's eyes narrowed. Every man has choices. It is the courage to face them that defines him. The words hit like a verdict. Tristana's fork clinked softly against her plate, but she did not look up. Sophia reached for her wineglass, lips tightening. Owen forced himself to meet Samuel's stare. You're right. And some choices can't be undone. It was Ethan, oblivious to the tension, who lightened the moment. Grandpa says choices are like flying. If you don't adjust when the wind changes, you crash. The adults laughed softly, though Owen's heart sank. Out of the mouths of children, truth often sounded harsher. When the plates were cleared and Ethan had been excused to show Sophia his room of model planes, the house grew quieter. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Samuel excused himself to the porch, leaving Owen and Tristana momentarily alone in the dim glow of the dining room. She rose, gathering dishes, but Owen spoke. You've built a beautiful life here. Her back stiffened. Don't romanticize it, Owen. It wasn't beauty. It was survival. He flinched. I never meant to. She set the dish down with more force than necessary, turning on him. Her eyes shone with a fire he remembered too well. You never meant to. You left me with nothing but silence. Do you know what that does to someone? To love a man who disappears without even the decency of goodbye. His throat tightened. I thought I was protecting you, protecting us. I wasn't ready. Her laugh was bitter sharp. You weren't ready to be human, Owen. You were too busy building monuments to yourself. And while you were out conquering the world, I was here raising a child who deserved better than lies. He stepped closer, voice low. And yet you lied too. You told him his father was a pilot who traveled the world. Why? The question silenced her for a moment. Then she spoke softer, but no less fierce, because it was easier than telling him the truth that his father chose glass towers over him, that he was abandoned before he even took his first breath. The words pierced deeper than any accusation could. Owen turned away, shame flooding his chest. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but every defense crumbled against the truth in her eyes. Later, as he stood on the porch with Samuel, the older man lit a cigar, the smoke curling into the night. Samuel said, You think this was an accident, not looking at him? Owen frowned. What do you mean? The hydraulic failure. The timing. The pilot. You're landing here. Samuel exhaled a thin stream of smoke. Life has its coincidences, but this feels like design. Owen's chest tightened. He thought of the anonymous messages, the deliberate tone of each. Someone wanted him here. But for what purpose? Samuel turned his gaze hard. Whatever brought you here, remember this. If you hurt her again, if you hurt that boy, you'll answer to me. The promise in his voice was iron. Owen could only nod, the weight of responsibility pressing heavier than ever. That night, Owen returned to the inn with Sophia, who complained about the provincial dinner and the judgmental grandfather. He barely heard her. His mind was trapped in that dining room, in Tristana's words, in Ethan's innocent smile. He lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, the scent of jasmine still clinging to his clothes. For the first time, the empire he had built felt like sand beneath his feet. In this town of memories, in a house filled with photographs and warmth, Owen realized that the battle ahead would not be about business rivals or hostile takeovers. It would be about truth, about the woman who once loved him, about the boy who might still need him, about the man he had to decide whether he was willing to become. And in the stillness of that night, with the mountains watching like silent witnesses, Owen whispered to himself a vow he had never dared to make before. I will not run this time. The mountains breathed differently at dawn, and Owen had begun to notice. There was something in the way the air lingered cool and damp against his skin. Something in the light that spilled slowly over the ridges, softening even the sharpest edges of stone. He stood on the porch of the Evergreen Inn, hands tucked into his pockets, watching the town wake. Behind him, Sophia's voice cut through the serenity like the clink of glass. Owen, we need to talk about Miami. She appeared in a silk robe, golden hair cascading around her shoulders, her beauty almost too precise against the rustic backdrop. She spoke of resort openings, photo shoots, and an engagement announcement that would secure her position in society as much as in his life. Owen nodded, where appropriate, but his eyes strayed to the road beyond the inn where Ethan's laughter rang out. The boy was running ahead of Tristana, his small arms stretched like wings, his toy plane glinting in the morning sun. The sound of that laughter, unrestrained and uncalculated, filled Owen with something he hadn't felt in years. Longing, perhaps, or simply recognition. Sophia noticed the direction of his gaze. Her voice sharpened. You're staring at him again, at them. Owen, what's happening to you? He turned to her, struggling for an answer that wouldn't ignite the fire he saw in her eyes. But the truth hovered between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Later that day, Tristana reluctantly agreed to let Ethan show Owen more of the town. It was easier to give the boy what he wanted than to battle his relentless enthusiasm. So they walked, the three of them, along cobbled streets that smelled faintly of roasted coffee and pine resin. Ethan darted from shop to shop, narrating his discoveries with the earnestness of a tour guide. This bakery has the best blueberry muffins. And that store sells wooden planes. Grandpa bought me one for my birthday. Oh, and the library has a whole section about aviation. Owen followed, captivated not by the shops, but by the boy's exuberance. Every detail he shared was a glimpse into a life Owen had not been part of yet. Every gesture, every tilt of the head, every mischievous grin felt achingly familiar. At one point, Ethan slipped his small hand into Owen's without hesitation. The gesture was simple, but landed like a thunderclap in Owen's chest. He tightened his grip, a silent promise he dared not speak aloud. Tristana walked a few steps behind, her expression unreadable. She watched how her son leaned into Owen's presence, and how Owen responded with a tenderness that seemed instinctive. And though her heart clenched with caution, a crack appeared in the walls she had built around herself. Back at the inn, Sophia waited. She had refused to join the excursion, claiming boredom with small-town trivialities. When Owen returned, she was seated in the lounge, flipping through a fashion magazine she hadn't truly been reading. How quaint, she remarked, her tone laced with sarcasm. Did you enjoy playing house? Owen's jaw tightened. It was just a walk. Just a walk, she repeated, her eyes narrowing. You're forgetting, Owen. We have plans, a life. I won't let some woman from your past or her child derail everything. Her words struck with surgical precision. Not just a woman, but her child. How she said it made Ethan sound like an obstacle, not a boy. Owen's stomach twisted. I need time, he said finally. Sophia rose, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. Time is a luxury I don't intend to give. Decide, Owen, because every hour you spend here, you're slipping further from the man I agreed to marry. She left him standing there, the echo of her ultimatum heavier than any business negotiation he'd ever faced. That evening, Owen found Tristana in the Johnsons' garden, pruning a line of rose bushes Samuel had planted decades earlier. The air smelled of damp soil and jasmine, the fragrance that carried memory. You shouldn't encourage him, Tristana said, without looking up. Owen froze. Encourage who, Ethan? You read him stories. You let him hold your hand. You let him look at you as if you're... She trailed off, her voice catching. Finally, she looked up, eyes blazing. You're not his father, Owen. Not in the way that matters. The words sliced deep, though he knew they came from fear more than malice. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Maybe not. But don't I have the right to try? Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, he saw not just anger in her eyes, but exhaustion. Years of carrying the weight alone. Years of protecting Ethan from disappointment, from heartbreak. You left once, she whispered. What if you go again? Owen reached out, brushing a thorn from her hand before it could pierce her skin. His touch lingered longer than it should have. Then I'll spend every day proving that I won't. Tristana's breath hitched, but she pulled her hand away. Words are easy, Owen. Promises are even easier. Show me something real. That night, Owen's phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it, but the insistence of the vibration gnawed at him. Another anonymous message. She's testing you. Don't fail her this time. Asheville is not an accident. It's a reckoning. He paced the room, the words gnawing at him. Someone knew too much. Someone was pulling strings and arranging pieces on a board Owen didn't yet understand. The hydraulic failure, the emergency landing, and the constant messages formed a pattern that was too deliberate to ignore. He thought of Tristana's warning, Samuel's suspicion, and Sophia's growing fury. And suddenly, it was clear this wasn't only about love or regret. Someone wanted to force his hand to corner him into facing what he had fled from years ago. Later that week, Samuel invited Owen to accompany him and Ethan on a fishing trip by the lake. Sophia declined, claiming she had calls to take and a manicure to fix. Tristana hesitated, but eventually agreed, perhaps to keep watch more than to welcome him. Ethan scampered along the shore of the lake, collecting pebbles and narrating grand adventures for each. Samuel cast his line with practiced ease, while Owen fumbled with his rod, drawing a chuckle from the older man. Not everything can be bought with money. Crack. Samuel said, his voice carrying over the water. Some things you must learn the hard way. Owen smiled ruefully, adjusting his grip. I'm beginning to understand that. As the sun dipped, Ethan tugged on Owen's sleeve. Look, I caught one. Indeed, the boy held a small fish wriggling in his hands, his face lit with triumph. Owen crouched beside him, helping him release it back into the water. Their hands touched, wet and cold, and Owen felt an unfamiliar surge of pride. He imagined it for the first time being here, teaching Ethan, watching him grow. The thought terrified him almost as much as it thrilled him. Tristana, watching from a distance, saw the ease between them. And though she tried to steel herself, a flicker of hope betrayed her heart. Owen sat by the inn's fireplace that night, staring into the flames. Sophia had gone to bed early after another argument. Tristana had left with Ethan, her parting words still echoing. Show me something real. The anonymous messages haunted him. Who was behind them? Why were they so invested in keeping him here? And why did they speak as though they knew his heart better than he did? But more pressing than the mystery was the choice looming before him. He could return to Miami, marry Sophia, and bury this chapter again. Or he could stay, risk everything, his empire, his reputation, for a chance to reclaim what he had lost. Ethan's laugh, Samuel's warning, Tristana's defiant eyes, they wove themselves into a net around his soul. For the first time in his carefully controlled life, Owen Crack realized he had reached the edge of his design. The winds had shifted, and if he didn't learn to adjust, he would crash. Owen passed the inn's front desk when he finally rose to leave the fire. A small envelope waited with his name scrawled across it. No return address, no explanation. Inside was a single slip of paper, the handwriting elegant deliberate. Tomorrow truths will be revealed at the table. Be ready. Owen's pulse quickened. Tomorrow's dinner at the Johnson house would not just be about food or family. It would be the next step in an unseen design. And for the first time, Owen felt the collision of every world he belonged to: his empire, his fiancée, his son, and the woman he had once loved converging on one inevitable moment. He folded the note carefully, slid it into his pocket, and whispered into the silence of the inn, "I won't fail this time." Evening fell over Asheville with a hush that seemed to seep into the bones of the mountains. The Johnson house glowed warmly against the darkening sky, its windows casting amber squares of light into the growing night. Inside the dining table had been laid again, candles flickering polished silver, catching their glow, and the scent of roasted lamb mingling with rosemary and thyme. Owen adjusted his cufflinks, though the act felt out of place here. This was no boardroom, no gala opening of another tower. Yet he found himself more nervous than at any deal he had ever brokered. Tonight, he wasn't defending contracts. He was defending the fragments of a life he had thrown away, and perhaps still had a chance to reclaim. Sophia descended the stairs in a crimson dress, bold and calculated like a flag raised before battle. She slipped her arm through Owen's, her perfume sharp cloying. "Let's make this quick," she whispered. "Smile, be polite, and let's put this town behind us." But Owen knew nothing about tonight would be quick or forgettable. Samuel sat at the head of the table posture, as straight as a man half his age. His gaze swept over each guest, as though cataloging their intentions. Beside him, Ethan fidgeted, too excited by the prospect of dessert to sit still. Tristana sat opposite Owen, her calm mask hiding the storm he could sense beneath. Conversation circled safely around weather, local festivals, and the harvest season. Sophia contributed little, her disdain cloaked in polite smiles. Owen spoke when prompted, careful, measured. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, waiting for a spark. It was Samuel who struck first. "So," Mr. Crack said, voice deliberate, "what does a man who owns half the skyline do when he is forced to look at the ground?" Owen met his gaze. "He learns what he's been missing." The older man's brows lifted slightly, as though conceding a small victory, though his eyes remained sharp. Tristana's hand tightened around her wineglass, but she said nothing. Sophia let out a soft laugh that sounded more like derision than amusement. Halfway through the meal, Sophia leaned forward, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "It's fascinating, really, to see Owen here in such modest surroundings. You know he was planning to propose in Miami this weekend." The words dropped like stones into still water. Ethan's fork froze midair. Tristana's expression did not change, but her eyes flickered, betraying something sharp and fleeting. Samuel's gaze shifted slowly to Owen, as though weighing his reaction. Owen cleared his throat. "Sophia." But she continued, eyes locked on Tristana. "He has a future. With me. One built on stability, success, and not on the ghosts of the past." The silence that followed was suffocating. Tristana set her fork down carefully, her composure intact. "Then congratulations are in order," she said softly, though the steel beneath her tone was unmistakable. Ethan's small voice broke the tension. "Does that mean you'll leave tomorrow?" The innocence of the question pierced deeper than accusation. Owen's heart twisted. He looked at his son, the boy he had barely begun to know, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed life cracking. "No." Owen said, his voice firmer than he expected. "I'm not leaving tomorrow." Sophia's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. "What are you saying?" But before he could answer, Samuel raised a hand, his voice steady. "Let the man speak." At last, Owen drew a breath, pulling the entire room into his lungs. "I came here by accident. Or at least I thought I did. But I've realized nothing about this. It is an accident. I can't explain the messages, the failures, the design of it all. But I know this being here has forced me to face what I ran from. His eyes met Tristana's. I ran from you. From the life we could have built. From the son I didn't even know existed. And for that, I have no defense. Tristana's mask faltered for the briefest moment. Pain, recognition, longing all flickered across her face before she regained control. Ethan stared wide-eyed, trying to piece together fragments too large for his young understanding. Sophia's voice cut through the air sharp as broken glass. This is madness. Owen, do you hear yourself? You're throwing away everything for what? A small town, a woman who despises you, and a child that... Enough! The word thundered from Owen's lips with a force that silenced the room. Sophia recoiled, shocked. Samuel nodded once, approving the steel he heard at last. Don't ever call him that child. Owen continued, his voice low, trembling not with weakness, but with conviction. He's my son. The declaration hung in the air, undeniable, irreversible. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. Samuel rose, his steps deliberate, and opened it to reveal a woman Owen hadn't expected to see here in this house, in this moment. His mother. Catherine Crack stood framed by the doorway, her elegance undimmed by the journey. She was commanding and unsettling like a storm cloud on a clear horizon. Mother Owen whispered, stunned. Good evening, Catherine said, stepping inside. Her gaze swept over the table, pausing briefly on Tristana, softening when it landed on Ethan. Then she turned to Owen, her eyes cool. It's time for the truths you've avoided to see the light finally. It was then that Owen understood. The messages, the orchestration, the reason nothing about Asheville had been a coincidence. You, he breathed. It was you. Catherine inclined her head. I did what needed to be done, because you, my son, were becoming your father. The words sliced through him, dredging up ghosts he had long buried. Arthur Crack. Brilliant, ruthless, emotionally hollow. The man who had built an empire and died alone in it. The man Owen had sworn never to become yet, whose reflection he saw every time he turned away from vulnerability. Sophia rose to her feet, outrage spilling from her every gesture. This is absurd. Owen tells her she has no rights. Tell all of them. You don't belong here. Catherine's gaze cut to her with icy precision. And who are you exactly? Another ornament. Another escape from the depths my son fears. Sophia paled, her confidence crumbling. I love him. Do you? Catherine's voice was velvet over steel. Or do you love the empire he shields you with? Sophia faltered, unable to answer. Owen closed his eyes, the weight of truth pressing heavier than ever. When he opened them again, he looked at Tristana, not as a ghost of what was lost, but as the anchor of what might still be saved. Her gaze met his, wary yet luminous, as though daring him to prove with action what words could not. Ethan tugged at Tristana's sleeve, whispering loudly enough for all to hear. Mommy, is he really my dad? The room stilled. Every breath seemed to wait on the answer. Tristana's eyes softened, but she said nothing. Instead, her gaze shifted to Owen, passing the weight of the truth into his hands. Yes, Owen said, his voice steady. Yes, Ethan, I'm your father. The boy's face lit with something Owen could only describe as wonder. And at that moment, he knew there was no turning back. Dinner ended not with dessert, but with silence heavy enough to crush. Sophia left the house in fury, her heels clattering against the stone walkway, like the retreat of a failed campaign. Catherine remained speaking softly with Samuel in the corner, two elders who had seen enough of life to know when a tide had turned. Tristana guided Ethan upstairs, leaving Owen alone in the dining room, staring at the remnants of a meal that had transformed everything. When she returned, her arms folded across her chest, her eyes guarded, she asked the question that mattered most. So what now, Owen? You've spoken words. You've made declarations. But tomorrow, when the reality of your empire calls, when the headlines twist this into scandal, what then? He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Then I fight. Not for towers, not for image, for him, for you, for the chance to be more than my father ever was. Her breath trembled, but she did not look away. Words she whispered again, actions he promised. For the first time, she let the silence between them soften just enough for the possibility to slip through. Later, as Owen stepped onto the porch, the night was alive with cicadas and the faint scent of rain. He pulled the envelope from his pocket, the last anonymous note still folded. Now he knew whose hand had guided him here. Catherine's, his mother's. The woman who refused to let him destroy himself as his father had. But the reckoning was no longer hers to command. It was his. Owen looked toward the mountains, their silhouettes vast against the starlit sky, and whispered into the darkness, "This time, I'll stay." And somewhere behind him, unseen, Tristana paused in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame, her heart barely daring to believe. The mountains woke more slowly than the city. In New York, dawn was swallowed by sirens' horns and steel flashing in the sun. But here, light unfurled patiently, slipping through branches, settling in valleys, as though the world understood that beginnings needed gentleness. Owen sat alone on this porch of the Evergreen Inn, a mug of black coffee cooling between his hands. The events of the night before, replayed like a fever dream. Sophia's rage, Samuel's piercing judgment, Tristana's guarded silence, Ethan's wonder-filled eyes, and his mother always, his mother, arriving like a conductor at the crescendo of a symphony he hadn't even known was playing. He hadn't slept. He doubted anyone in that house had. The door creaked behind him. Catherine Crack stepped out, impeccably dressed as ever, her presence a portrait of restraint. She regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "You did well," she said softly. "Did well." Owen turned toward her, his voice bitter. "You orchestrated every step of this. You dragged me here, cornered me like a child, and now you stand there and applaud." Her eyes, so much like his own, narrowed. "I did what was necessary. You were walking the same path as your father. Cold, detached, building castles of glass and dying inside them." He set the mug down with a thud. "Please don't compare me to him." "But you are him," she pressed. "Or you were. And I swore the day you were born that I would not watch history repeat itself." Arthur Crack. The name alone was enough to freeze Owen's breath. His father had been a titan of industry, ruthless in every pursuit, incapable of tenderness. Owen remembered boardrooms, not embraces, lectures, not lullabies. And then the final image, his father alone in a penthouse, heart-stopped, empire intact, but soul emptied. "I am not him," Owen said at last, the words torn from his chest. "I left Tristana because I was afraid. But fear isn't cruelty." Catherine's gaze softened, though only slightly. "No, fear isn't cruelty, but indifference is. You thought disappearing was cleaner than staying and risking imperfection. That was your father's greatest sin, believing control mattered more than connection." Owen closed his eyes, her words cutting deeper than any blade. "And what about you, Mother? You controlled me just the same. Anonymous messages, sabotage, forcing me into this stage." Her lips curved, not in amusement, but in sad acknowledgement. "Yes, I controlled because you wouldn't listen otherwise. Because I knew that without being forced, you would never stop running." He wanted to rage and accuse, but something broke instead. Perhaps it was the weariness in her voice, or the weight of her own regret. Catherine Crack was not just a manipulator, but a mother desperate to save her son from repeating history. Later that morning, Owen's phone vibrated with relentless urgency. Reluctantly, he answered. His chief financial officer's voice poured through crisp and panicked. Mr. Crack, the press has it. Photos from Asheville. You, the pilot, the child. They're calling him your illegitimate son. Shares dropped 4% overnight. The board is demanding a statement. Owen pinched the bridge of his nose. And Sophia, she's already spoken to one of the lifestyle magazines, denied the child painted you as distracted. Owen laughed without humor. Distracted. That was one way to describe the unraveling of everything he thought was immutable. When the call ended, he stared at the mountains beyond the inn. Towers, shares, contracts. Things he had worshipped like gods suddenly felt fragile, brittle. A dynasty of glass that could shatter with one photograph. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps it deserved to. That afternoon, he found Tristana at the small airport, where she often worked between flights, her uniform traded for jeans and a simple blouse. She was checking a plane's wing with the focus of a surgeon. Ethan darted around the hangar giggling as he traced chalk lines on the floor. Owen approached cautiously. The news is out. She didn't look at him. I know. I want to protect him. Protect you. At that, she turned eyes flashing. Protect us. From what, your world? The tabloids? Or from yourself? He flinched. I mean it, Tristana. I don't care about the board, about the markets. I care about Ethan. Her laughter was brittle. Care. You don't get to waltz in after 5 years and declare that word as though it erases everything. I'm not erasing, he said, voice low. I'm trying to rewrite. For a moment, her composure cracked. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw exhaustion lining her features. She had built walls high and thick, but even walls erode. Ethan deserves stability, she whispered. Not a father who might disappear again when the world demands it. Owen stepped closer. Then let me prove I won't. Her silence was not agreement, but it wasn't dismissal either. That evening, Ethan insisted on showing Owen his latest flight experiment. In the Johnsons' backyard, he had tied paper wings to sticks, launching them into the twilight air. Some spiraled, some dove nose first, but one glided beautifully, catching the last of the sun. See, Ethan exclaimed. It's all about balance. Owen crouched beside him, smiling despite the heaviness in his chest. You're right. Balance is everything. Tristana watched from the porch, arms crossed, but her eyes softened as she saw them laughing together, their silhouettes etched against the fading light. For just a heartbeat, it looked like something whole, something she had once dreamed of and forced herself to bury, and the sight terrified her as much as it moved her. Later, Owen confronted his mother again, this time in the quiet of the inn's library. Shelves of worn books lined the walls, and Catherine stood by the window, gazing out into the night. You had no right, he said quietly, to use Ethan to manipulate Tristana, to drag me here. She turned, her expression softer than he had ever seen. I didn't use him. I gave you the chance to know him before it was too late. Owen, do you know how many men I watched your father become cold replicas of himself? I couldn't let you be the same. His voice broke. And what if I fail? What if I become him despite everything? Catherine stepped closer, placing her hand on his cheek. For once, she wasn't the ruthless matriarch, but a mother. Then fight harder, because unlike your father, you still love. And love, Owen, is the only thing that makes men more than builders of monuments. Tears stung his eyes, though he turned away before she could see them fall. That night, Owen returned to the Johnson house. He found Tristana in the kitchen, cleaning dishes, the lamplight gilding her features. She looked up as he entered, wary, but not unwelcoming. I came to say good night to him, Owen murmured. She nodded toward the stairs. He's asleep. He hesitated, then stepped closer. And you? Her eyes held his dark and luminous. I don't sleep easily anymore. Something fragile shifted in the air between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an understanding, an acknowledgement that the lines between past and present were blurring. He reached out, fingers brushing hers, as he took the plate from her hand. The touch lingered, soft, electric. She didn't pull away. Owen, she whispered, voice trembling. Don't make promises you can't keep. I won't, he said. And in his chest, for the first time, he believed it. Outside, the mountains loomed silent and eternal, witnessing generations of love and loss. Two people stood on the fragile edge of possibility in the quiet kitchen of a modest home. Tristana's walls were still intact. Owen's empire crumbled, and the world outside was sharpening its knives. But in that moment, with hands almost joined, and silence alive with meaning, something undeniable stirred. A beginning. Morning came with a silence too heavy to belong to the mountains. The evergreen inn was hushed, as if even the walls understood that something irreversible had begun. Owen sat at the edge of the bed, his phone buzzing with relentless urgency. Headlines flooded the screen. Skyline mogul's secret son. Owen Crack, caught in Asheville scandal. Engagement in doubt as model fiancé retreats. Every article carried photographs him on the streets of Asheville, Tristana at his side, Ethan between them holding his hand. The boy's face was too clear and too telling. Owen scrolled through them with a hollow chest. His world, the empire he had built floor by floor, contract by contract, was crumbling under the weight of truths he could no longer deny. Sophia appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, her expression livid. Do you see what you've done? Years of cultivating a brand, a future, a life people envy, and now you're tabloid fodder. Owen lifted his eyes slowly. They're not lies. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. That's the problem. By noon, the board of Crack Enterprises had convened via emergency call. Faces filled the screen. Men and women Owen had once commanded easily, now lined with doubt and accusation. Mr. Crack, the chairman, began, voice cold. The situation has become untenable. Investors are demanding clarity. The market has lost confidence. Unless you make a public denial and reaffirm your commitment to the Miami project, your position as CEO will be in jeopardy. Owen's throat tightened. A denial. A simple sentence could shield the empire. But to deny meant to erase Ethan, to erase Tristana again. I won't deny my son, Owen said finally. The silence on the line was thunderous. Then one by one, the faces hardened. Then, Mr. Crack, prepare for consequences. The call ended. The weight of his choice settled over him, heavy but strangely liberating. Sophia erupted the moment the screen went dark. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed everything for them. She spat the last word like poison. Owen rose, meeting her gaze steadily. No. I destroyed everything the day I left them. This is the first time I've done something right. Tears glittered in Sophia's eyes, but were born of rage, not heartbreak. You'll regret this, and when you do, don't come crawling back. She stormed out, the slam of the door reverberating through the inn. For Owen, it was not the sound of loss, but of inevitability. At the Johnson house, Tristana sat rigid on the porch swing, the newspaper spread across her lap. Ethan played nearby, blissfully unaware of the storm his existence had unleashed. When Owen arrived, her eyes blazed with fury. How could you let this happen? His face, our lives, splashed across every paper in the country. Owen sank to his knees before her, voice raw. I never wanted this. But hiding you, it was killing me. And it would have killed him too when he grew up and learned his father chose shame over truth. She looked away, her arms wrapping around herself. Do you have any idea what it means, Owen? He's 5. He'll be hounded, questioned. He doesn't deserve that. I know, Owen whispered, but he deserves a father who stands for him, not behind him. Her breath trembled, caught between anger and the ache of believing him. That evening, Samuel joined them, his cane tapping against the wooden floorboards. He studied Owen with eyes that had seen decades of battle both in the sky and on the ground. The older man said, "You've stepped onto a battlefield you don't understand. Media investors, society, they'll eat you alive, and they'll try to devour her and the boy in the process." I know, Owen said, quietly. But if I step back now, I lose them forever. And I lose myself. Samuel's lips curved into something between a grimace and a smile. At least you're fighting this time. Let's see if you've got the endurance. The following day, a press conference was called in New York. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted like weapons. Owen stood at the podium, suit immaculate, though his heart hammered. He spoke not of profits or projects, but of people, of mistakes made, of love abandoned, of a son he had only just begun to know. I am Owen Crack, he declared, his voice steady. And yes, Ethan Johnson is my son. To deny him would be to deny myself. Whatever consequences come, I accept them. My legacy will not be towers of steel. It will be the life I build from this day forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some reporters scrambled, others sneered. The stock ticker in Times Square dipped live as the speech aired. But Owen felt lighter, like he was breathing truth instead of smoke for the first time. Back in Asheville, Tristana watched the broadcast on the small television in Samuel's living room. Her son clapped at the sight of his father on the screen. "That's Daddy," Ethan cheered. Tristana's eyes blurred. She wanted to resist, to cling to her anger. But against the tide of Owen's words, the fortress of her heart weakened. He had chosen the hard road, the one that led not to safety, but to them. When Owen returned that night, weary yet resolute, she met him at the porch. For a long moment neither spoke. Then, in a voice barely audible, she said, "You've changed everything." "Only if you let me," he replied. Later, when Ethan had fallen asleep, they sat together on the porch, the night thick with the scent of magnolia. The silence between them was no longer hostile, but tender, tentative. Tristana turned to him. "You don't understand what you've given up. Your empire?" He shook his head. "What good is an empire if I come home to emptiness? If my son thinks I chose walls over him?" Her eyes glistened, the moonlight catching tears she didn't wipe away. "You don't make this easy." "I don't want easy," Owen whispered. "I want real." And though no kiss passed between them, no vow was spoken, something shifted in that quiet. It was not reconciliation, not yet, but it was a seed planted in truth, watered by sacrifice, that might in time grow into something neither of them could yet name. In the stillness of the mountain night, as the empire of Owen Crack trembled miles away in the city, the Johnson porch became the center of his world. Beside him sat the woman he had once lost. Inside, his son slept untroubled by headlines. The future was uncertain. The cost was enormous. But for the first time, Owen felt he had chosen not survival, not reputation, but love. And in that choice, fragile as it was, he found a beginning worth fighting for. The storm did not arrive with thunder or lightning. It came quietly through whispers in glossy magazines and sharp words on late-night talk shows. It crept through headlines designed to wound, photographs stolen from shadows, and rumors too precise to be coincidence. Sophia's hand was everywhere. She had left Asheville with fury burning in her eyes, but she had not left the battlefield. From her penthouse in Miami, she unleashed the arsenal of connections, publicists, and editors she had cultivated for years. She would ensure he bled for choosing someone else if she could not keep Owen. The first article appeared 3 days after Owen's press conference. Tristana Johnson Pilot, or Predator, the woman behind Owen Crack's downfall. The piece painted her as an opportunist, a woman who had orchestrated the scandal to trap a billionaire. Photographs of her in uniform were framed as evidence of ambition, her quiet strength twisted into arrogance. And worst of all, Ethan's name was dragged into it, reduced to a bargaining chip in the eyes of strangers. When Tristana saw the article, her hands shook so violently, she could barely hold the paper. "They're calling me a manipulator. They're calling my son." Her voice broke. Owen took the paper from her, tearing it in half with more force than necessary. "It's lies. They'll see through it." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. He knew the media's hunger. Lies were often more delicious than the truth. The attacks grew relentless. Talk shows dissected Tristana's past, her career, even her family. Paparazzi appeared outside the Johnson house, their lenses invading what little peace Asheville had left. Tristana grew colder, her walls rebuilding brick by brick. "This is precisely what I feared," she told Owen one night, her voice low and sharp. "You dragged him into this circus. You said you would protect him, but look, he can't even play in his yard without cameras snapping at him." Owen's chest tightened. "I didn't choose this storm. Sophia did. But she could only do it because you left the door open." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You made us vulnerable." Again. He wanted to argue, to tell her he was fighting, that he was standing taller than ever. But the pain in her voice silenced him. Owen felt her pull away for the first time since arriving in Asheville, not in anger alone, but despair. One evening, Catherine arrived at the inn with a folder in her hands. She set it on the table before Owen, her expression carved from stone. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were documents, old letters, contracts, and photographs yellowed with time. At first glance, they seemed irrelevant, but then Owen saw the name Rodrigo Hayes. "Who is this?" Catherine's eyes flickered. "Your half-brother." The word struck like a blade. "What before I met your father? He had an affair with his secretary. She bore him a son. He denied him, erased him. By the time I discovered the truth, it was too late. The boy was grown, carrying the scars of rejection. He lives now in Canada as a professor. Brilliant, but marked forever by abandonment." Owen staggered back, the pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. "And you think I'm repeating him? That's why you dragged me here?" "Yes." Catherine's voice trembled for the first time, because history has a way of repeating itself when pride blinds men. "I couldn't save your father from himself, but I swore I'd save you." Owen sank into a chair, the weight of the legacy crushing him. He saw his father's face in every choice he had made to flee, every excuse for control. And he understood Catherine's desperation, though it did not erase the sting of her manipulation. The next blow came not from newspapers, but from Sophia herself. She appeared on a morning talk show, radiant in white, feigning heartbreak with perfect precision. She told the host, "I only ever wanted to love him," eyes glistening. But she, Tristana, she knew exactly what she was doing. She dangled a child in front of him, claimed him as Owen's, and destroyed everything we built together. The host leaned in. "So you don't believe Ethan is Owen's son?" Sophia paused just long enough to plant doubt. "All I'll say is, where's the proof?" The question reverberated across the country like a shot fired in a crowded square. Proof. The word spread through headlines, tweets, and boardroom whispers. If Ethan was truly Owen's son, why hadn't he proven it? When the clip reached Asheville, Tristana went pale. She's questioning his existence, his identity, as if he's disposable. Owen clenched his fists. Then I'll give them proof. But Tristana shook her head violently. You won't drag him through tests, through headlines, through more humiliation. He's a child, not a press release. Her words sliced through his determination. Once again the chasm yawned between them. His need to protect colliding with her, need to shield. That night, the weight of it all pressed down. Owen wandered into the garden, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. Tristana followed reluctantly, her arms folded tight. We can't survive this, she whispered. Yes, we can, he insisted, stepping closer. We can, if we stand together. Her eyes searched his, desperate and afraid. But will you stay when the empire finally falls? When there's nothing left of the man you once were? Will you still want us then? The question cut deeper than any headline. He cupped her face gently, forcing her to see the raw truth in his eyes. I don't want steel and glass anymore. I want you, him, this. For the first time, her composure cracked. A tear slipped free. But before either could speak again, a sharp voice interrupted. Samuel said from the porch, his cane tapping against the wood. It's time to prove it. The next morning, Owen called a second press conference. This time he did not appear in New York, but in Asheville, outside the modest airport where Tristana worked. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolling. He stepped to the podium, Tristana and Ethan at a distance, Samuel and Catherine flanking them like guardians. I've heard the questions. Owen began, his voice steady, though his hands trembled. I've listened to the doubts. Let me answer plainly. Ethan Johnson is my son. I will not subject him to tests for your entertainment, nor allow his worth to be measured by speculation. He is mine not because of DNA, but because I choose him. I claim him. I love him. The crowd erupted in chaos. Questions shouted, flashes blinding. But Owen did not waver. Sophia's world thrived on denial, on performance. He would thrive on truth, no matter how raw. Back at the Johnson house, Tristana confronted him, her voice trembling with fury and awe. Do you realize what you've done? You've painted a target on all of us. I've painted a truth, he replied softly. She looked at him for a long time, searching. Then quietly she said, You're nothing like your father. The words broke something open inside him, something he hadn't even realized was locked. In the silence that followed, Ethan ran into the room, clutching a paper plane. Look, Daddy, it flies. The plane soared across the air, wobbling but landing gently in Owen's hands. He smiled, tears burning his eyes. Yes, Ethan, it flies. That night, Owen stood at the window of the Johnson house, gazing at the mountains cloaked in moonlight. Behind him, Ethan's laughter still echoed, mingling with the quiet rhythm of Tristana's movements as she tucked their son into bed. The world outside was ruthless. His empire teetered. Sophia sharpened her knives. But here in this fragile sanctuary, something more substantial than towers was being built. And Owen knew that if he had to choose tomorrow again, he would still choose this. The Asheville sky opened in a sweep of gold, the dawn that seemed to wash the world clean. The storm had battered them for days. Media scrutiny, Sophia's vengeance, boardroom betrayals. But this morning felt different, softer, promising. Owen stood in the Johnsons' backyard, watching Ethan toss his paper planes into the air. Each one soared a little further than the last. The boys' laughter carried across the grass, pure and unbroken, a sound untouched by scandal. Tristana emerged from the porch, coffee in hand, curls glinting in the morning light. Her eyes found Owen, and though they still carried wariness, there was also something else, a quiet acknowledgement. He had chosen again and again to stand. Your empire is shaking, she said softly, joining him. I know, he replied, but I'd rather watch it fall than lose this. She studied him for a long moment, then looked at Ethan. You don't make small promises anymore, do you? Not when it comes to you, Owen said, his voice steady. But peace rarely lingers unchallenged. That afternoon, news broke of Sophia's final strike. A lawsuit in New York accuses Owen of fraud, emotional manipulation, and breach of promise. Her interviews painted her as the wounded lover abandoned for a pilot who schemed her way into his life. Owen read the headlines with grim calm. Once such accusations would have sent him into a frenzy of damage control. Now they felt almost hollow. He had already lost the one thing he feared most, Tristana's trust, and was slowly earning it back. What was the world's judgment compared to hers? Still, when reporters swarmed the gates of the Johnson house, shouting questions at Tristana, it cut too deeply. Ethan clung to her leg, frightened by the cameras. She pulled him close, fury blazing in her eyes. This is what I feared, she told Owen that night. You think love will shield us, but it won't. It drags us under with you. His voice broke. Then, let me pull you above. Let me prove I can carry us through it. It was Catherine, surprisingly, who shifted the tide. She arrived in Asheville again, this time, not as a manipulator, but as an ally. At a press conference, she stood beside her son. She said, My husband Arthur Crack built an empire, but destroyed his family. I watched him abandon, betray, and isolate. I will not watch my son repeat that. What Owen has chosen now, his son, his truth is not a scandal. It is redemption. Her words, delivered with the poise of a woman who had lived through storms far darker, turned something in the narrative. For the first time, headlines began to soften. The empire shook, but Owen was no longer cast solely as a villain. Later, Owen found Tristana in the garden, the moon painting silver across her skin. He stopped a breath away, searching her face. Do you regret it? He asked, letting me back in even for a moment. Her lips parted, her eyes shimmering. I regret believing once that love was easy, but I don't regret letting Ethan know you, and me. His voice cracked. She hesitated, then whispered, You scare me, Owen, because if I let myself believe again, I don't think I could survive losing you twice. He stepped closer, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. Then I'll spend my life proving you won't. The kiss that followed was not rushed, not desperate. It was steady, reverent, like a vow sealed in silence. The lawsuit in New York became a spectacle. Sophia arrived in designer white, her lawyers polished and merciless. Owen appeared with Catherine at his side, and though cameras flashed, his gaze never wavered. Tristana refused to attend, determined not to let Ethan be paraded before the world. But when Owen testified, speaking not of profits or contracts, but of a child's smile, mistakes made, and lessons learned, she knew this was no longer just his fight. She walked into the courtroom, mid-session, head held high. Gasps rippled through the gallery as she took her seat behind him. And when he turned, their eyes met hers, shining with fragile courage, his with gratitude so raw it nearly undid him. The judge dismissed Sophia's claims as theatrics. Her credibility unraveled under scrutiny, her carefully crafted lies collapsing. She left the courtroom not in triumph, but in disgrace. Weeks later, when the dust began to settle, Tristana invited Owen to the hangar. Ethan skipped between them, holding both their hands, his joy uncontainable. Inside waited a small Cessna gleaming under the afternoon sun. Ready. Tristana asked, her smile tentative but real. Owen nodded, sliding into the co-pilot seat beside her. Ethan strapped into the back, his eyes wide with wonder. As the plane lifted from the runway, Owen felt his chest expand with something he hadn't known in years. Freedom, not of wealth, but of love. He glanced at Tristana, her hands steady on the controls, her beauty more breathtaking than any skyline. "Where are we going?" Ethan shouted over the headset. "Wherever we want," Owen replied, meeting Tristana's gaze. And in that moment, he knew this was his empire. Not towers of glass, but the sky shared with the two souls who made him whole. On a quiet evening, weeks later, beneath the glow of lanterns strung in Samuel's garden, Owen knelt before Tristana. Ethan stood proudly beside him, holding a velvet box. "I once built towers that touched the clouds," Owen said softly. "But none compares to the life I want to develop with you. Tristana Johnson, will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, her hand trembling as she covered her mouth. She looked at Ethan, who nodded eagerly. "Say yes, Mommy." And with a laugh that broke into sobs, she whispered, "Yes." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her, their son's laughter echoing around them like music. Months later, the world had adjusted. Crack enterprises no longer dominated headlines, but neither did scandal. Owen had stepped back from the throne of CEO, choosing instead a quieter role that allowed him to spend weekends in Asheville learning to fish with Samuel, baking with Catherine, and watching Ethan's first soccer games. Tristana continued to fly her wings, unbroken, her passion untamed. Sometimes Owen joined her in the sky, clumsy at the controls, but learning, always learning. Their wedding was small and intimate, held in the garden where it had all begun. Ethan carried the rings, grinning, as though the world belonged to him. And in a way it did. For he had been the bridge, the reason, the proof that love, though buried, though scarred, could still rise. As they exchanged vows beneath the endless Carolina sky, Owen whispered against her lips, "Forever." And Tristana, with tears shining, whispered back, "Forever." This love story filled with betrayal, redemption, and second chances has ended happily. Owen, Tristana, and Ethan found their forever, not in towers of steel, but in the open sky of love and family. Now, dear readers, if this journey touched you, made you cry, made you believe in love's second chances, please like, share, and comment below with your feelings. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story that might steal your heart. Because love stories like this deserve to be told, and you deserve to feel every beat of them.